Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got a couple of things to discuss, including a couple of signings and two significant trades to discuss. We'll get to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here at the N10 Talking Channel. Now, as I said, I could make some more smaller videos discussing a few big things that have happened over the course of the week, over the next couple of weeks, just like I did around the trade line. And today, we've got a few things to discuss, as there have been two significant trades that went down last night. We'll start with a couple of signings that happened on Friday. Some pretty significant ones, but mostly they were just depth signings. For the Arizona Coyotes, they signed left winger / center Michael Carcone to a 2-year contract extension of an average annual value of $775,000, and deal will begin at the start of next year. Now, Carcone was a solid depth forward over the past couple of years. 2 years ago, played in the minors, also played a couple of games in the NHL. Put up 24 goals, 41 points in 48 AHL games, then had 4 goals and 6 points in 21 NHL games, so definitely did really solid. Only got into 9 NHL games last year, putting up 2 goals and 3 points, so not too much. But at the AHL level, he was a monster, putting up 31 goals and 85 points in 65 games. So way over the point per game mark in the AHL. And Carcone was a really good beast at the AHL level. So not too surprised that the Arizona Coyotes extended him. Carcone looks like a really good player. I would probably expect him to be in the minors again next year, but depending on how the Yotes roster looks and what they do this offseason, I could see him be at least a very good fourth line forward for the Coyotes. So it's a good signing there, and I think Carcone could do some really good things at the NHL level, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was an AHL forward. Still, though, he had some fantastic numbers at the AHL level. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he wound up being a fourth line forward next year for Arizona. Next, with the St. Louis Blues, they signed longtime NHL player Adam Gaudette to a 1-year contract extension that will have an average annual value of $775,000, and they'll begin at the start of next year. Now, for Gaudette, he was basically mostly an NHL level forward. 2 years ago, he split time between the Blackhawks and the Senators organization, did quite well, putting up 5 goals and 14 points in 58 NHL games with the Hawks and Sens combined. Went to free agency last year, signed a 1-year deal in Toronto, and was basically an AHL forward for the entire time. Then he was dealt in the trade package to help them get Ryan O'Reilly to the St. Louis Blues. Once again, he spent this time in the AHL, wasn't able to get very much going for him, and he wound up finishing with no NHL games played last year. So it was quite surprising to see he got it on the NHL, but he did put up 27 goals and 51 points in 65 games, which wasn't too bad. So I think with the way that St. Louis's roster is being constructed, he'll most likely be an AHL forward again. It wouldn't surprise me if he was like a depth forward, maybe getting onto the fourth line, but I was thinking he'd be more of a minor league forward with the option of being called up in a couple of spots. So definitely, I think Gaudette's most likely going to be an AHL forward again next year. Like I said, could easily play in the bottom six with the Blues if they have injury troubles or if they don't do too much this offseason. But I think for the most part, Gaudette will most likely be back in the AHL again next year. But it is a really good depth signing to sign a player who does have a lot of NHL experience to a cheap 1-year deal. So some good signing there for the St. Louis Blues. Next with the Winnipeg Jets, they signed left shot defenseman Ashton Sautner to a 1-year $775,000 deal that will begin at the start of next year. Now, for Sautner, he's more of a depth defenseman. He does have a couple of NHL games under his belt with the Vancouver Canucks, but as basically an AHL defenseman over the past couple of years, put up 3 goals and 13 points in 41 AHL games with the Canucks affiliates a couple of years ago. Signed a 1-year deal with the Jets last offseason. This year had 2 goals, 12 points in 65 games. So, once again, not overly productive. The Jets have a solid D-core and a very deep one at that. They're even finding a hard time to put Ville Heinola into the lineup. So, in my opinion, Sautner would most likely be an AHL forward. If the Jets move a couple of pieces, maybe he can be somewhat of like a 7th D on the Jets roster, but I think it's most likely that Sautner would be an AHL forward next year. So not a huge signing there, but just an add depth for the Winnipeg Jets for next year on their blue line. So a good signing there for the Jets. And then the big one that I want to get to here today was Erik Haula. On Friday, Erik Haula signed a 3-year, $3.15 million contract extension with New Jersey Devils that will kick in at the start of next year. Now, Haula, he's a solid player. Of the big forwards that could have lost, in free agency this year, which is Wood, Tatar, and Haula. I thought Haula was definitely the one who would be the most likely to resign. Haula's a solid forward. He can play center, he can play on the left wing, so he's very versatile. He worked really well with the jersey in a good middle six role last year. 2 years ago, with the Boston Bruins, he had a solid point total, putting up 18 goals and 44 points in 78 games. Was dealt to New Jersey last offseason for Pavel Zacha, and then he put up 14 goals and 41 points in 80 games this past year. So for Haula, he was a really good find for the Devils, and I think his extension is really worth it. It was the first time in his NHL career he was able to put up at least back-to-back 40-point seasons, and his first time hitting the 40-point plateau since his career year back in 17-18 with Vegas, when he hit 55 points. So definitely, Hall's been looking good over the past couple of years. 3 years, $3.15 million AAV is not too bad. Hall's a solid middle six forward, and I think he should continue to help the Devils. So a good sign there for New Jersey. As keeping Haula improves their middle six, it negates the opportunity of losing a key guy off their lineup. And I think Haula, whether he plays in the second or the third line, and whether he plays at center or wing, should continue to be a legitimate scoring option for the Devils as a depth scorer. So really good signing there for the Devils, and I think Haula's contract is well deserved, and I think it's really good that the Devils were able to keep him. So good signings all around. Sodner's a good depth defenseman who should be able to play in the minors for the Jets. That's a good depth forward who will most likely play in the minors for the Blues, but I could see him play at the NHL level. And Carcone, depending on what the Yotes roster looks like at the start of the season, I think it could be a bottom six forward at the NHL level, but wouldn't surprise me at all if he was starting the AHL again next year. And then Hall is a really good middle six forward who I think is well worth that contract. So some pretty good signings there, but next we go over to what everyone wants to come to this video for. So early yesterday morning, just after I recorded my last video, there were a couple of significant trades that happened from around the NHL. So we'll start with the one that happened first, and that is that the Nashville Predators have traded forward Ryan Johansen to the Colorado Avalanche, with 50% of his salary retained, in exchange for pending UFA Alex Galchenyuk. Now, we'll start with the Nashville Predators side. It's a lot quicker here. For Galchenyuk, he's on his 9th team in the past couple of years. It's been quite surprising to see how Galchenyuk's gone from a superstar high-level top 5 pick a couple of years ago to now being a depth forward. So the Avalanche did give him a contract in season. He played a couple of games at the NHL level, didn't really do much, was more of an AHL forward, still didn't really do good there, and he didn't really produce a lot, and the only reason he was getting into NHL games was because the Avs were really banged up last year. He was a pending UFA right now, so he has the ability to become an unrestricted free agent July 1st, so unless the Predators sign him, the Preds will basically be getting nothing in return for Johansen. So it's quite surprising that that was all that was in the deal, as I could have definitely seen the Preds ask for at least a little bit more than that for Johansen, at least something like a 3rd or 4th round pick. But they wound up getting Galchenyuk, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was wound up being signed. Once again, Galchenyuk's mostly a depth forward, maybe bottom 6, mostly AHL forward at this point in his career, so I think most likely he'll be a UFA. So not too big of a return for Johansen. They also retain $4 million of his salary, so they only are able to get $4 million off his salary for the remaining 2 years of his contract. But it's still a really solid trade for Nashville. We saw before the trade deadline they moved out some big contracts. Ekholm was one, Granlund was another. Jeannot wasn't really a big contract, but he did have some money. So they definitely moved out a lot of key guys who have some big money contracts, and this is another guy who has a big money contract. So the Predators are setting themselves up very well to be very active this offseason, as they have a ton of cap space right now, and they could definitely retool that roster and add some players with significant cap hits. So I think this is a really good move for Nashville. Definitely think they should have at least gotten something more in return, whether it be a decent prospect or a 3rd or 4th round pick, instead of pending UFA, who they probably won't resign. But it is what it is, and I think as long as they were able to get rid of Johansen's contract, they were definitely doing a pretty good move. As for Colorado, this fills their second-line center hole. It's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to be, I think, Kadri level, which was what they had when they won the Stanley Cup. But I think this fills the second-line hole they had on that team. We know that they had a really good second-line center in Kadri. They lost him in free agency last year. They never really replaced him. They were hoping Newhook could step in and be that second-line center. He never did. Guys like Comfer, Rodriguez were able to play in the second-line center role last year, but they weren't as good as Kadri, and that definitely showed in the playoffs. So definitely getting a second-line center like Johansen is a solid upgrade for the Avalanche. And they don't even get him at the full $8 million cap hit. Getting him at $4 million for literally nothing is an absolute steal for the Avalanche. Johansen, 2 years ago when the Preds made the playoffs and everyone was having their career years, he had a fantastic season. He put up 26 goals and 63 points in 79 games, sort of like the Johansen that a lot of people were saying good things about when he was acquired by the Predators a multitude of years ago when they traded him for Seth Jones. Definitely looked good. This past year, ran into injury troubles, wasn't as productive, only got 12 goals and 28 points in 55 games played, so definitely was a lot banged up last year. But I think on the Avalanche, you should definitely be able to thrive. Johansen's a solid second-line center. I think at $4 million cap hit, that's a steal of a deal for the Avalanche. He can come in, be their second-line center, play with some of their other good guys like maybe a Lehkonen or Nichushkin or someone like that. And he can definitely put up something similar to those numbers they had a couple years ago in Nashville, I think. And I think that is a major upgrade for the Avalanche. I think that solves the second-line center problem, at least for the next couple of years. Johansen has 2 years left now, and the cap is now down to $4 million, so it's a steal of a deal for the Avalanche, in my opinion. Johansen, while his contract was not the greatest, at $4 million, he's a solid second-line center who I think should definitely improve that center group and be a good second-line center behind McKinnon, and he should be able to put up at least 50 or 60 points over the next couple of years. And they didn't give up anything to get him, so I think this is a really good deal. It's a good deal for both sides. The Preds wanted to clear cap space. They were able to do so with this Johansen deal. Like I said, Johansen, in my offseason rumor plans blog post and video, I definitely did say that Johansen was a trade option. He does wind up getting dealt. So I think Johansen to Colorado is a huge win for the Avalanche. In my opinion, this trade, the Avalanche do win. I know that the Preds were able to clear cap space and get rid of a bad contract, which they definitely needed to do. But I think given the fact that Johansen's still a pretty good center, he can play really well in a second-line role in Colorado, and he can probably put up 50, 60 points. And the Avalanche got Nashville to retain 50% of salary, and it didn't have to give up anything. I think makes this an absolute win for the Colorado Avalanche. Now we'll have to wait and see. Maybe the Preds wind up getting someone stellar with the newfound cap space they got from the Johansen trade. But in my opinion, with the upside of Johansen and his cap hit not being high now, I think the Avalanche do win that deal. But definitely let me know what you think down in the comments. Do the Avalanche win this trade or do the Predators? Definitely love to hear you think down in the comments. And do you think Johansen will be able to thrive as the Avalanche's second-line center? And lastly here, the other trade that happened yesterday afternoon was another pretty significant one. Now, we talked about a couple of days ago how the Arizona Coyotes could definitely be looking to improve their team and start to come out of the rebuild. And they made a move that sort of signified that, as they were able to get Sean Durzi from the LA Kings in exchange for the Montreal Canadiens 2024 second-round pick. This is a pretty good move for both sides. For LA, we know that they were looking for some cap space. Durzi doesn't get them the most cap space. They could have moved a guy like Roy, could have moved a guy like Haula, who would have given them more cap space. But that does clear a little bit of cap space for moving Durzi. So it gives them a little bit more cap space. It gives them another spot on the defensive end, whether they go and use it on a veteran third-pair defenseman in free agency, or whether they give one of those young guys like Mover or Spence that opportunity. I think that's definitely a really good move to free up another defensive spot. And I think this definitely guarantees that Brandon Clark will be a regular next year in the NHL level. And they also get a 2024 second-round pick. I think that was a pretty decent package to return. I'm not sure Durzi is exactly worth a second-round pick. I could definitely see him be worth like a third. But I think a high second-round pick in next year's draft would definitely be quite a bit to give up for Durzi. So definitely, I think Montreal's second-round pick will probably be top 15 in my opinion. I don't see Montreal making the playoffs next year. So I definitely think the LA Kings will have a solid second-round pick for next year. And they can use that pick in a future trade to get something else in return. So definitely a solid trade for the Kings to free up cap space and get a solid draft pick. As for Arizona, this is the sort of move that we were saying that they could start doing. Durzi is a great young offensive defenseman who could definitely help them for not just next year, but for the future. We know that Durzi's in the final year of his contract at a $1.7 million cap. It will be an RFA at the end of the year. With the Arizona Coyotes' multitude of cap space, it would not surprise me at all if they would be willing to sign him to a long-term deal at some point next year. So I would definitely think that is a possibility to just lock him up long term. Durzi can play either side of the defense. He's more likely a right side defenseman, but he can play left if necessary. A couple of years ago, he started the season in the AHL, put up 5 goals, 11 points, 13 games, was able to earn himself a call-up with some of the Kings injured, and he finished that season at the NHL level, putting up 3 goals, 27 points, 64 games, showed his offensive potential. Last offseason, signed a 2-year contract extension, went into last year, and he definitely did fantastic. He put up 9 goals and 38 points in 72 games, and he's a really good offensive defenseman in my opinion. I think he could definitely fit in the top 4 for Arizona, and he can be putting up a ton of points on that back end. So when you already got a young guy like Valimaki, who was able to put up a ton of points last year, you add a guy like Sean Durzi, that defense is looking pretty good on the Arizona Coyotes side. It's not great, and they still have a lot of work to do, but having young guys like Durzi and Valimaki, who should be key offensive defensemen for the next couple of years, is a solid one for Arizona. And I think they're able to move the second round pick, given the fact they still have a couple of 2024 second round picks, so moving one of them is not too significant to them. And using LA's cap space against them to try and take on Durzi's contract was definitely a win for them, in my opinion. So this was a pretty good deal, in my opinion. Arizona gets a solid top 4 defensemen who can put up points offensively and should be able to help that team not just now but in the future as well. And I think that should be a very good win for the Arizona Coyotes to use their cap space to get a guy like Durzi who should help them for the next couple of years. As for LA, it's a little bit bad to lose Durzi, who was a really good offensive producer on the back end for them. But they do get a solid second round pick in next year's draft who they can either use themselves or trade as part of a trade package. And they also get some cap space that they can use to go do other things. So, in my opinion, this is a pretty good win-win situation. But just given the offensive upside of Durzi and how young he is, I do think the Arizona Coyotes win this deal. But definitely, let me know down in the comments who you think won this deal. Did the Arizona Coyotes gain Durzi win this deal? Or did the Kings get a pretty good return for a decent young defenseman who has some offensive upside? Definitely, love to hear what you think down in the comments. But those are all the news updates for now. There seems to be a lot of speculation that some things could happen later today, so if there is some things that happen later today, I may do another video. We have some talks that Philadelphia Flyers are talking with 2 teams. They're talking with the St. Louis Blues around a deal that's surrounding Kevin Hayes, and around the Carolina Hurricanes surrounding the deal with Tony DeAngelo. The DeAngelo deal hit a snag apparently, and they have to try and work around something or that deal could fall through. The Flyers and Blues are still working away at a trade. It sounded like they had something worked up, but that a player on the Blues with a no-trade clause was going to hold up the deal and not willing to move that no-trade clause. So it sounds like the Flyers and Blues are trying to work out something else as well. So it sounds like there's definitely a few irons in the fire for Philly right now, and we could see a couple of trades in not too distant future. Plus, when I got up this morning, there was also a couple of reports that the LA Kings could be closing in on a trade to acquire Pierre-Luc Dubois. There's a lot of talk that there could be an extension involved as well, and that players like maybe a Gabriel Velarde or an Alex Galchenyuk could be heading to Winnipeg. So definitely interesting news happening right now, and we may have a couple more trades to discuss in the not too distant future if those ones all go through. But definitely a lot of speculation right now, and I think that there could be even some more trades over the next little while. So definitely can't wait to see all of that. Definitely let me know down in the comments what you think of all the signings plus the 2 trades. Love to hear your opinions. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. So remember to like this video, and if you really liked it, remember to subscribe. I also do a blog. I just did my trade bait list. I usually do this around trade deadline and in the off season. I've done this for the last couple of years. I always do a blog post discussing who I think will be the most likely players to be dealt. So definitely, I'll leave a link to the End-to-End Hockey's trade bait list down below, right beside my End-to-End Hockey blog's link as well. So definitely remember to check that out, as I think you'll find some of my names on the top 40 list surprising. Definitely, I do trade bait lists, trades, rumors, off-season play on my blog, so definitely check that out. I'll leave a link to that in the description below, as well as the link to the End-to-End Hockey's top 40 trade bait lists also down below, so definitely check those 2 things out. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.